happy to have you. Lisa's here. This will be sort of a little intimate conversation, but we look forward to catching you up with where we are, particularly now that we've been able to start with getting the little kids vaccinated this weekend. It was great. So we feel like we're starting to move forward. So Lisa, I'll have you take it away.
Well, Malene is the boss. She's driving the car.
Okay, thanks, Lisa.
Yeah, so we have very good news. It's amazing if you just think about science and how far we've come in less than a year, where a year ago we didn't have vaccines released and we didn't have therapeutics or treatments. And now our arsenal has grown with vaccinations from 5 to.
Hi, Linda.
Shh, guys, sorry. They're excited, I guess. We have vaccines available for 5 and up, and new therapeutics coming on the market as antivirals. And I was just reflecting on it, that I think it also reflects on the strength of our educational system over the past decades, where the focus on technology and science has definitely facilitated these quick advances. And Moderna, which has come out as the lead horse of this, is a Boston-based entity. So something to be proud of in our country for contributing to this. So jump ahead. And these are our meetings, and this is an intimate group. This felt like the right cadence of meetings, but we can reflect that we don't want to, I know I present a lot of the same information at a lot of meetings and never want to waste your time. So you can maybe just reflect back with other labor leaders if this is a meeting that we still want to continue having to the end of the year, and then potentially go to an ad hoc. So look forward to your feedback on that. And then jump ahead. Well, this was a surprise. So we started this morning in substantial, and then we dropped to moderate. And that's, I don't believe, a real drop. What happens over the weekend is there's a lag in the CDC. They actually don't update their results, even though the state of California is updating the results. And so I think if you were to go on the website today, you'd see us in moderate right now, but I think that's just a lag, because the results I'm seeing are much more consistent with substantial transmission in the county. You can jump ahead. And that's because what you see at the tail end is exactly what we experienced last year. We saw that uptick in cases that we expected. We do have almost 50,000 people who are still unvaccinated in our community, and that allows both ongoing COVID transmission. And we also are seeing breakthrough cases, which is why I'll talk a little bit later about just the importance of boosters, especially for educators and school staff. But I am not anticipating it will peak like it did last year. I'm anticipating that this is gonna go up a bit, and then in the weeks as we see more kids vaccinated, that we'll see our rates flatten and return hopefully back down to low and moderate levels. Jump ahead. So I think this is where you saw a surge in activity over the past weeks at school, where we have investigated over 275 cases. It's more than that now because we are still investigating cases. And that's not surprising to us at all, is that COVID finds unvaccinated people. And so our largest group of kids, our large group of population is unvaccinated kids between 5 and 11 and the 0 to 4 age group. And the 5 to 11 have been engaging in parties and other social activities that are driving transmission. We saw an uptick in what we are calling suspected student-to-student transmission. I don't think that's a reflection of anything concerning to us. We overcalled all of the student-based transmissions. If there's any possibility there could be a student-to-student transmission, we call it that. So it might err on the side of overestimating, but we think that makes up for the cases that we don't identify. So what you'll see as early as this Friday is, if you look at, it says students eligible who are vaccinated. We're going to split that up into the 5 to 11 and the 12 and above group. So you're going to see, it's not going to be bundled together. So you'll get to see, hold on one second. You didn't get to hear my mom voice, my stern mom voice. I should have stayed unmuted. It's when I sound like my mom, I just get back to my non-mom mode. So you'll be able to see the progress we make on the 5 to 11-year-olds. And we're making great progress. We vaccinated, well, as of today, we've probably vaccinated over 2,400 kids between 5 and 11 years old. So it's with the partnership with the Office of Education, worked with us to set up all these large clinic sites. Our partnership with the schools on the school level, school staff was there. I was at Miller Creek this weekend, and school staff was there. So we're so appreciative of all the volunteers and supports that we get from the school. And that's why Marin, I believe, will be leading the state again in the vaccination rates for our kids. So super excited about that. Jump ahead. The mask mandate ended, but not in schools. So the mask mandate in schools stays in effect. We've been seeing a lot of news where people just don't seem to be focusing on the fact that if you're unvaccinated, you still need to wear a mask indoors wherever you are. So that's still in effect. And we just want people to be prepared when they travel to other Bay Area counties that their mask mandates, only Solano and Marin County do not have a mask mandate in the Bay Area. The other counties still have their mask mandates in effect.
Hey, Lisa, if you don't mind just taking questions. So here's a question. Erin, why don't you go ahead and just ask it, since we're such a small group?
Thanks. I didn't want to be rude.
No, that's not rude.
It's been reported to some teachers that if there are only vaccinated adults in the room, even though it's a school, then they can take their masks off together in a room. But that goes against my understanding of the CDC still says we need to wear masks at schools. Do you have any input on that?
So if it's just this, it's up to the school. Well, it's first up to the district and the school policy. So that's what we're going to defer to. And we're already seeing there are some schools that are going to interpret it more conservatively. But if it is an all staff meeting and there's no students present, then vaccinated individuals do not need to wear a mask. But we're seeing a range. There are some schools that are just going to keep it in place for role modeling to the students, and they value requiring masks just for that important role modeling for students as they still remain unvaccinated. But if it's just a staff meeting, at this point, vaccinated staff could be not need to wear their mask if that's the school or district level policy.
Okay, but if it's during the day and students are present then everyone needs to wear a mask in the office.
If they're not present in the room where the meeting is, then they can still not wear a mask.
But if a student arrives,
once a student breaks into the room, then all deals are off.
That seems clear to me. Thank you very much.
Right, you can jump ahead. And so this is a kind of what I was talking about a little bit, that every group and business now has the opportunity to set their own policy. So some groups and businesses may have to keep masks required for all, regardless of vaccination status. Some may require to verify the vaccination status of people before they let them come into their facility or campus without wearing a mask. Again, if students are present, everyone wears a mask. And then some groups may just allow people to attest by wearing a mask or not to determine what their vaccine status is. And again, we're just trying to encourage that people are respectful of people who continue to wear masks. And in Marin County, we see a lot of people following CDC guidance, since we are at substantial transmission, continuing to wear masks. And also you'll see some of the corporate businesses like Target haven't yet updated their kind of local read of the laws. So masks are still required in Target, and I was just there and 100% of people were wearing masks. So that's just for us to just be flexible with our mask wearing or not. Jump ahead. And we've just been asked at the public health just provide some guidance. And this is not even guidance or recommendations. It's just considerations for people to try and reduce the risk of COVID-19 transmission in settings. So we've learned a lot. So we know when we have crowded settings that COVID is more likely to spread. So groups can reduce their risk by having decreased capacity in a room. We know face coverings work, that schools are probably the best evidence of the effectiveness of face coverings. And so one way of having meetings or groups together is by requiring people to wear masks, and that's a way to decrease the risk of transmission. You also can just limit participation in person to fully vaccinated people only. It's another way. And then this is a tool that we recommend if you are going to have in-person gatherings, just try and keep a list of who was attending in case there was an exposure event, so we can then notify people if they had an exposure. Jump ahead. So school-based testing, we're doing a lot more testing and bringing a lot more supports. We're still only recommending symptomatic testing, which is of students. We're not recommending asymptomatic or surveillance screening. Again, we see it as very low yield and high demand. So the reward is not as good as the output is not as good as much as the inputs. We are working with schools on doing response-based testing. So if there's a known exposure event, we offer to go on site with the schools to offer support. And that's where we received additional support from the Office of Education and Marin Health, and we're coordinating supports from the state as well. There's still no supply of additional supply of home-based tests except through the Office of Education. We are working with the state right now to reconcile. We kind of got a jump on our home-based testing pilot, and we jumped ahead of the state a bit in how they're implementing, and we're working to reconcile that. But at this point, any home-based kits need to come through the Office of Education. And then just for you guys to be aware that there's a national shortage of Binax, and we have approval from the manufacturer, from Abbott, that we have an extended expiration date, which is really great because that'll mean we have sufficient testing supplies to get us to the end of the year. Hi, Linda, do you want to ask a question on this one?
Yeah, so I had a student who had symptoms and was told by the office to take a COVID test and provide that test. But then the parents didn't provide the test and the girl came back. And then the office said, well, we don't think they have to do a COVID test. They just are suggested. But on our decision tree at our school district, it still says that they have to have the negative test to come back. Is that still the case?
That's how, yes, that's our interpretation of the decision tree. There's not a state order or mandate, but that's certainly how we would recommend on all symptoms. And there is one symptom that drives everyone crazy is the runny nose and congestion. And we know that in San Francisco, they're not requiring people to have a COVID test for runny nose and congestion. We're not there yet in Marin County. We've seen anecdotally a lot of, not a lot, I don't want to overstate. So, a significant number of kids that have had only nasal congestion for us not to shift our policy and not recommending COVID-19 testing for that runny nose group. So if the school is following our decision tree, then they would have gotten the test or require them to stay at home for 10 days and treat it as a positive.
So Linda, did the parent refuse to give the
No,
test?
she just sent the child back. And then I called the office and I'm like, oh, because I know the office gave her those directions.
Yeah.
And then I didn't get any, like the child just appeared the next day.
Yeah.
And so when I called the office, the person in the office said, well, I didn't think it's required. And I said, look at the decision tree. And I pull it up from our school district and it says it's required. And then the parent did send it like 5 days later.
Okay.
She sent the child before she sent the test. But the office staff wasn't clear. And I said, I don't think it's changed.
Okay. No. Yeah.
We'll reinforce that at our next meeting.
Yeah.
That would be helpful.
Mhm.
And because like you saw, like there is substantial, viruses are super smart and they find unvaccinated people. And again, you can see the jump that we saw in kids who we've identified as positive. And it's just reflective again of that uptick in a smaller group who are unvaccinated. So again, hopefully we're going to see the tide shift pretty quickly in the upcoming weeks. But at this point, that's why we weren't ready as a county to be more relaxed where we have been with the runny nose congestion in the past. We're not ready there yet. So
yeah.
and
Thank you.
And we're really just working with the schools to get all of the schools onboarded into the state testing program. We see testing as an important in our next phase. When you return from school after the winter break, you're going to have a high percentage of kids who are vaccinated across elementary and secondary school levels. And we are going to be trying to shift away from these very strict isolation and quarantine scenarios through testing, where right now we are excluding close contacts who had a close contact outside of the school setting from school. And that's something that we hope through testing we'll be able for them to be identified as, if they're unvaccinated and identified as a close contact, we'll be able to use testing to keep them in school rather than being excluded from school. And we're also having some natural experiments where we're having kids who are getting tested after 5 days after they've been diagnosed with COVID-19 and they've already cleared their infection. So if you remember, the 10 days is a really long period, especially in kids who have really strong immune systems. So the other thing we are hoping to start moving forward in the new year in 2022 is even shortening isolation periods when we can show that a student is not infectious. Of course, our goal is to optimize vaccination. That's our most important tool. So most students should be vaccinated. The majority of students should be vaccinated if we achieve our goals. But again, we don't want to be excluding students unnecessarily when they're non-infectious and have that interruption to their school and to their instructional time. So that's another benefit. That's another reason we want to have testing widely available at all schools. And then the state just as we led the state again with calling it a one and done test, that we were treating the antigen positive or antigen negative as a positive or a negative, just because the expectation to do reflex testing was very challenging, and the data was there to show that the antigen tests, there are low false positives and low false negatives. And so now the state has caught up to us and is allowing just to have the antigen test as acceptable. But if it is a symptomatic person who has a negative result, they are recommending the confirmatory test. And that's our practice in the schools as well. Morgan, you have a question?
Yeah, thanks. I just want to make sure I'm super clear on what you just said and that I'm understanding everything correctly. If we have a student whose family has chosen not to vaccinate them, they are eligible for the vaccine, but their family has chosen not to vaccinate them, and they have outside of school a close contact with a known COVID case. So this is, CDC, yep, you're on a close contact with a known COVID case. They still get to come to school and eat lunch with their friends and sit in a group 2 feet from other students and have the teacher come over and work with them on their math problems and have all of that contact at school, provided that they've tested negative. Have I understood?
No,
that?
it'd be a different testing cadence. They would have, depending on the contact, potentially daily testing to keep them in school.
Okay, so
they would have to basically show, and again, this is why we want to build capacity at the school level. There's some schools that are ready to pilot, some schools aren't. It's really going to depend on an individual school level. So the school would pilot, child shows up, gets their antigen test in the office, it's negative, they attend school. So and again, that wouldn't start that could start, or as our pilot, we're hoping to start this December.
To me, it feels like an unnecessary risk to ask the other students to take and to ask the teacher to take. Again, given that we're not talking about somebody who's not eligible for the vaccine, we're talking about somebody who's chosen not to get it for whatever reason. So my question is kind of what's the data on the effectiveness of that daily testing regimen? Is that as effective as keeping them out of school, or what are we losing in terms of safety for that?
The false negative test, so you'd be mostly concerned on an antigen having a false negative, and that's less than 1%. That's a false negative. So it's very low likelihood that if a child had a negative antigen test, especially if you're doing serial antigen tests, like you're doing 5 days straight of antigen tests, the false negative rate is going to go down increasingly.
So I guess my question is, the window between you've tested negative and you've become transmissible, what I'm hearing you say is that window is less than or more than 24 hours. So as long as we test them daily, we'll catch it before they become transmissible. Or there's a 99% chance we'll catch it before they become transmissible.
There's a greater than 99% chance that
okay. Thank you.
And again, they would still be required to wear a mask, because the reality is we have kids that are on the campus. We had like 275 known kids on campus during their infectious period, probably higher than that. And again, we are still demonstrating the safety of schools. So again, it's going to be a school policy decision. This is not a public health. It won't be a public health policy or requirement yet. What we might be looking at more is the opposite, is the mandates even extending down to 5 to 11-year-olds. So that's the other thing that's on the horizon at the same time of this, is the mandates. So it should be potentially a much smaller group of individuals. But for this, again, as we try and get through this, December, the reason why we'd like to pilot it as early as December is because there are kids that won't even have their first vaccine appointment until until November 21st through no fault of their own. At this point, it's what we're experiencing now is the demand is so high and people just aren't getting the vaccine appointments because the demand is so high. So to have students excluded when they want to be vaccinated, I think that's the group that we really are targeting. And again, hopefully we're on the same boat that we'll have very high vaccination rates, that it's a much smaller group that we'd be working with.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, to be clear, I do draw a delineation between a kid who's, their family is doing everything right and trying to get them vaccinated and just couldn't get the appointment or wasn't eligible. I think there's a distinction between that and, the high school kid whose family, for whatever reasons, have chosen not to. Just as just a data point of one, I'm finding personally in my classes, the issue is not kids refusing to wear masks. It's kids who are really bad at it. It's the kid who I have to tell them 16 times a period, mask over your nose, mask over your nose, mask over your nose, or there's this fashion trend where they wear it right across the very tip of their nose with nice big gaps up above. And I could enforce 100.0% perfect mask wearing if that was all I did. If I didn't worry about teaching contact and all that content, and all I worried about is mask wearing, I could get there. That's about what it would take, to say nothing of stepping out in the hallway and see, like I saw a kid the other day walking in the hallway with a stick of celery. He goes, "I'm eating, I don't need to wear a mask." No, that's not how that works. So I just want you to be aware of kind of the perspective at schools of, masking is happening. And I'm not seeing kids who are just out and out refusing. But it's not, there's some gaps. It's not perfect.
And again, I think that's where we'll be in a different space where, we'll have staff with boosters, most kids will be vaccinated. And so again, it'll be a school by school decision. We'll be piloting it with the school to see how it is, because they might identify that it's not even, the feasibility becomes less depending on the number. It's probably the number of kids that are in this scenario, how feasible it is for any school office to manage that. So
Lisa, I have a question. Oh, sorry. I have a question for Morgan, Aaron, Linda. Are you hearing of any teachers, school staff that are trying to get their boosters that are having any trouble getting them? Do we seem like we're okay? Okay, good.
Only if they went to Northgate this Saturday.
Oh God, Lisa, I was there. Woo! Woo-hoo. It was
We had an unexpected change in operations where Safeway was supposed to run the clinic and they went to Sonoma. So
just a long line. Yeah. Oh, it was something.
But we got through it. All right, you can jump ahead to the next one. And I already mentioned this. We're just working with the state Office of Education and Public Health just to, again, we jumped ahead because we were willing to be a pilot for home-based testing, and the state then changed their procedures and protocol. And now we are working back, reverse engineering our kind of following the same reporting protocols with the state. But just to be aware of that. And again, we really want to see 100% of our schools signed up for the program, because that will be how they access testing resources moving forward. And again, even with, you can see on this slide, even with moving forward, testing will still be important. We can have new variants and other things that affect us in this upcoming next school year. So we just want every school to be ready and have full capacity for testing, ready, because it has to be done before we leave the school year, because we know that during the summer everything goes dark, and we want the schools to be 100% ready for the 2022-23 school year. It's crazy.
So Lisa,
and again, this is just, go ahead. Do you want to do this one, Mary Jane?
No, I was just going to add to this. So you can see here, so imagine everybody with a symptom in our county has access to a test. Not everybody, school staff and students. So while our supply is not enough to give everybody a test for home, to have at home, we still have plenty. So what's happening is schools they have their supply, and when they need more, they call, they get more, right? And so this just gives you a sense of a countywide public, private, independent parochial. So we're talking 47,000 people, students and staff. At this point, we've had 2,321, right, tests that have been taken. And you can see our number is still 13 positive, 13 inconclusive. So the data is looking good. And then right now, we also have the data of what the symptoms were. So we're working on getting that broken out as well, just so we can look at, what was it that was going on? And I think that this is another, I think, good example of us doing our own data while other data is happening, and that can, I think, help. And we update this every single morning. So every morning we're looking at this information.
Again, it's just reassuring, just to be aware, there's all the other bugs that you're used to from other seasons are now circulating. So it's still a COVID until proven otherwise, but just to be aware, there's a lot. We're only seeing sporadic flu at this point, but a lot of the other rhinoviruses, there's other coronaviruses and RSV are circulating.
Mhm.
Oh, look at Miller Creek bumped up to 48%.
Yeah. So that means, so well, you got it. So at this point, some of our school districts did receive some supply directly from the state, just for you to know. But this gives us a sense. We're trying to maintain the what shall we call it? The accountability part. So for example, if Mill Valley called and said, hey, we want more tests, we're going to say, wait a second, you had almost 500, but you've only reported 40. We think you still have a lot of tests in play, just to keep our supply, as strong as we can keep it.
You can jump ahead. And this is just for the privates as well. So and again, it's important for the public schools to have this other kind of layer of protection, because there's so much interaction among our students at every grade level, in sports and other places. So again, this is just a layer of protection through testing that we're offering for early identification of cases. You can jump ahead. So just boosters, we are encouraging all school staff to get boosters. We're seeing at this point, probably almost 70% of our new cases are among vaccinated individuals, especially those more than 200 days from their initial vaccine. And even though it's not the perfect match, we are seeing that the booster does offer high protection. So we are encouraging school staff, especially those who are in elementary school, who have a higher risk of contact with an unvaccinated person, to get their booster shot.
So Lisa, do you think there'll be multiple boosters then? Is that we get the next booster, then X number of days potentially?
Yeah, I think it'll be really interesting to see how COVID behaves in the United States after kids are vaccinated. And there's going to be a new vaccine. So there's going to be a vaccine to Delta, and even if there's a mutation, whatever the mutation would be in the future would be closer to Delta than it would be to the Alpha variant, which is the vaccine that we all received. So next fall will be an interesting time of year for us to see what the COVID activity looks like. Is there going to be a recommendation for boosters, or is it going to be limited to certain groups based on their age and higher risk for poor outcomes if infected, or their occupation based on high risk of exposure? So there's just going to be a lot of unknowns. And I know 2 companies are developing a combo vaccine, the COVID flu vaccine for next flu season. So it's going to be a whole new world.
Can I jump in with another question?
Yep.
I want to again clarify something you just said, because it sounds like the recommendation has changed. My recollection of the recommendation on boosters, and this is from the CDC, not Marin HHS, was that it was strongly recommended for people with underlying health conditions or elderly, et cetera. And it was allowed for people who are at risk because of occupational setting, but not necessarily recommended. They were sort of giving this kind of wishy-washy, well, you should make your own decision, check with your doctor, et cetera. And it sounds like you're now saying, no.
I would say we recommend, we don't strongly recommend it. We strongly recommend, I would say we urge everyone over the age of 65 to get a booster. We would recommend those groups with an occupational risk to get a booster.
I would suggest that maybe you put out some kind of a communication to teachers on specifically that point, and maybe breaking down, how strong the recommendation is. I know for Johnson & Johnson, it's a lot stronger than for Moderna or Pfizer. Yeah. I think that would be useful clarity. I know the last time I talked to my members, I, shared the CDC information that, like, yeah, you can get one if you want, but they're They're not banging on the door telling you to.
Yeah, I think the reason we're wishy-washy, and this is just from personal experience, I got the Moderna booster, the side effects were really tough. And so I think that's why it's easy in public health to make the strongly recommend or urge for the 65 and above. And then we are knowing though, what we are seeing, we're seeing breakthrough cases, and it's not just in a 65 and above. Probably the median age of breakthrough cases is a little bit younger. It's probably around 40. And now it's where it used to be a 50-50 split. Well, in the beginning, it was like 25% of our cases were among vaccinated and 75% of new cases were among unvaccinated. Now it's flipped. So I think that's where, and Matt and I just talked about it this morning. What you recommended, we're planning for, but not for this week. We're planning for it after we get through the school week, because we create this, there's not an urgency to get the word out in the next 2 weeks around, we recommend boosters for the occupational, because it'll conflict with our work on getting the pediatric vaccines. So that's the only reason that you'll see it probably won't be until next week. You'll see the message that you're recommending is exactly what Dr. Willis and I talked about today, but it'll be probably next week once we shore up our pediatric vaccine operations, because it's still, we need probably like a week, and we don't want to create competition between those who, we really do see the 5 to 11 as our priority vaccination group from a pandemic response perspective.
There's also a bargaining element of this too, which is if Marin HHS is strongly recommending boosters for staff, then it gives us some leverage to go to our respective districts and say, look, we really need an extra sick day for our members so that they can get vaccinated and recover, as opposed to burning their weekend or burning a sick day. And that allows us to, again, provide tools to increase vaccination rates. If people can get vaccinated on a weekday and then take an extra sick day to recover, that's a nice incentive to do it. And more people.
I don't know if we'll be at strongly recommend, but I'll bring that back to Dr. Willis though.
I'm not asking you to change the recommendation now. I think that a consideration should be kind of what are districts going to do with that information? And I think the stronger the recommendation is, the more likely it is that we'll be able to get a sick day, which will improve vaccination. That's one element of the conversation.
Well, I'll bring this back to Dr. Willis, and then we'll prepare for next week's or the following week to make a stronger communication. So it could be a classroom-based swabbing.
Yeah, that's something.
Okay, all
Right. And then you'll see us, it's not 0% anymore. Like I said, we are at, we vaccinated 2,400 of the 15,000 5 to 11-year-olds. But that data is not going to be uploaded until Wednesday, because that's when the
Lisa,
data gets.
I've been saying 3,000.
You can round up.
That might be an exaggeration, right?
More than 3,000 wanted it that day. More than 3,000 came to get vaccinated.
Yeah.
We had a lot of walk-ins. And have you guys all been on one of my, I don't want to run through this if you all have seen this. This is just the science of the vaccine.
Yep.
All right, so I'll jump through it really fast then. You can go back. So this just for you to know. So there's multiple phases of a study. The first phase is to find the right dose. And if you remember from some of my past presentations, we saw with teenagers, they had such a strong immune response. So for the first phase, they tried 3 different doses on the 5 to 11-year-old study participants. It was a smaller group. And they're looking at, does it create an immune response, and what do the side effects look like? And so you can jump ahead to the next slide. They found that the best dose is the 10 microgram dose. It gave the same antibody response as 20 micrograms, just slightly less than 30 micrograms in that age group, in the 5 to 11-year-old age group. But most importantly, they were looking at side effects too. So this looks confusing, but it's not. That first row is dose 1, and then the second row is dose 2. And then if you look at each of the columns, it's 10 micrograms, 20 micrograms, and 30 micrograms across. And so when they looked at fever the first time, so this group of kids was given there's different dosages, and there wasn't fever their first dose, but if you jump down to that second row, you'll see 100% of kids who received the 30 microgram dose had a fever as a side effect. And then you can jump across to muscle pain. you'll see that 100% of the children who received the 30 microgram dose had muscle pain. And then it was only 12% of those who received the 10 microgram dose. So that's why they picked the 10 microgram dose, which wasn't surprising to us at all, especially seeing how immunogenic the adolescent group was to a high dose. So you can jump ahead. So then they went to a much larger group. So that first group was just 322 children. And then they studied the placebo versus the vaccine itself and the 10 microgram dose of around 4,600 kids. So much larger group. You can jump to the next slide. And this is where, again, they looked at that immunogenicity. And this is a very, you don't have to know what anything is really here, but if you look at that first box, that's 5 to 11-year-olds, it's the amount of the titer, the antibody levels that they produced. And then they compared it to the 16 to 25-year-olds who received the 30 microgram dose. And you can actually see that the 5 to 11-year-olds produced more antibodies at a lower dose than the comparison group of 16 to 25-year-olds who received a 30 microgram dose. So that's very, very reassuring that it's strongly immunogenic with the lower side effects in this 10 microgram dose. And they also looked at the biggest question we get is like, oh, should I wait for my 11-year-old to turn 12? And the answer is absolutely not. Get the dose. There would be higher risk of side effects with that higher dose in a 12-year-old. And if you remember the myocarditis concern. So I think that we're seeing that even for the 9 to 11-year-olds, they have the same comparison of the antibodies. The younger the age was, they have more antibodies just because kids are just so immunogenic. They have strong immune systems. So you can jump ahead. And this is the other thing that we're looking at, can actually prevent transmission. So they compared the placebo to the vaccinated group. Everyone was managing Delta at this point. In the placebo group, there are 17 cases of COVID-19. In the vaccinated group, there's only 3 cases of COVID-19. So that just shows the efficacy of the vaccine, which is really reassuring, especially remember this vaccine is for the Alpha variant and not the Delta variant. So we're still seeing high efficacy of this vaccine against the Delta in the pediatric age group. Jump ahead. And this is just a busy slide. We did not see myocarditis or pericarditis like we saw in the adolescent group. There's been no deaths in the study groups, and they've been following them for months now. The studies ended in early September. So we have longer term information on this group. The most common side effect is swollen lymph nodes. And we saw some hypersensitivity or in this, like this would be rash, another other kind of mild reactions in both the placebo group and in the vaccine group, but there are no cases of anaphylaxis in this study group, which is that severe allergic reaction. Jump ahead. So we are rolling. They've already updated the slides. We're going to be at Strawberry Point. We try to distribute our vaccine clinics geographically throughout the county. And so we'll be at Strawberry Point this weekend. And then the following weekend we'll be at Novato High School. So just trying to get across the county, and each of these sites have around 1,000 doses to vaccinate kids. And then we're also doing school-based clinics. So these will be on site in the school during the school day. And this is, we've targeted both geographically in West Marin, and then some of the schools in our lower income community. And then we're also partnering with the Office of Education, have a special clinic for children with some developmental or behavioral needs. So it can be a quieter clinic. And then I think that's it.
Cool.
These are just additional clinics we're going to be offering. And that's it.
Lisa, just for everybody to know, we are still looking for some volunteers. So if you hear of anybody who's interested, we'll send another flyer out. It looks like about 15 per pod is what we're looking at. And we did switch it up a little. In the early adult pods, we had people were coming like from 7 till 6 at night, obviously way too long for any of us. So now we're doing half days. So the shifts are a little better. So we need double the people. So any help you can do, help us with that would be great. And we're using, parents, we're just moving the information. So it's getting a little harder as we get closer to the holidays. Erin, do you have a question?
Yeah, just because I signed up to volunteer, but I haven't received any information back.
Okay.
When should volunteers expect to hear confirmation, or like, should I resubmit?
Yeah, that
I'll-
we usually, yeah, you should be hearing right away, but do me a favor and resubmit. Just
Okay.
in case.
And
but
I'll take- Oh, sorry, I'll take a look as well, Mary Jane.
Okay,
Yeah, and
thanks.
I the same, Aaron and I were signed up for the same day. at the
Okay.
same Place and neither one of us have heard anything.
I'll look for both of you.
And Melina, can you put the link of where to sign
Yeah.
up right here into the,
Yes, give me
Whatever.
1 moment. I have to just get into the Google Drive. Everybody stay on. Don't go anywhere.
And we sent it to our unit members, and I really encourage
thank you. Yeah,
participation.
we had a lot of
We're happy to
people.
send it again.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. It's also cool for the little ones to see their teachers, you could imagine. They're so excited.
You know, some of my parents reported they couldn't get in, like they tried to get into the ones in Mill Valley and or anywhere in Marin, they're full.
Yeah, to sign up to get their vaccination?
Yeah.
Yeah, so just to note, as Lisa mentioned, we're going to keep getting more information out. Each of the super pods has about 200 extras that are not scheduled for walk-ins on those days. So that's available. And then we'll be looking to see if we can get more. If we need to, then we'll be looking at more super pods, right? At least. So we'll try to, and we're trying to keep up with the amount of vaccine we have available too.
We just got 3,900 more vaccines, so
Good.
we're on target.
Okay, perfect. Okay, any more questions? All right, so
Well, we appreciate you. We're getting there.
Got it.
Thank you. Thank you, Melina. Do you have any opinions about, we're gonna be having a planning meeting, I forget, as we go into the next semester. Your thoughts about continuing with this monthly these meetings? Any of you have any information? I mean, any thoughts about it? Would you prefer we went ahead and kept going and whoever joins is great, or do something, as Lisa said, on an ad hoc basis?
I said this last time, I think if the community meetings are after school, I think that it serves the same purpose. I just know in the past, sometimes the community meetings regarding schools have been held at like 1 p.m., which I
Right,
can't attend. So as long as they're after 3 o'clock, I think a general meeting suffices for me personally. But we do very much appreciate your time.
Mhm. Morgan, Linda?
I think unless something changes, I think as long as we stay on the trajectory that we're on, probably monthly meetings are more than we need. I do think it's nice to sort of have this more intimate group where we can have a back and forth and a Q&A as opposed to kind of a larger setting or a webinar format. But I think monthly is probably excessive. And I would say unless something changes and the guidance is all changing and we're doing something radically different, like closing schools again or something, that
Right.
probably every other month would be sufficient.
Linda, were you gonna add to that?
Yeah, I agree with Aaron. That was one of the reasons we asked for these meetings in the first place, was because the ones for the schools were during school time and we could never attend.
Yeah.
So it's great to have opportunity to ask questions as well.
Well, what if we do this, Lisa, as we move forward? Because all of our meetings are not stopping, but December was our reevaluate, right? That we would move the community meetings to later. So let's just say we do that. And then in addition, if we could count on you all, if there's something that, if you ever want a meeting, that you would say, we want a meeting, right? And then we could figure, we'd make sure we make that happen. Lisa has been so good about in real time setting the time, and then that we would move. Do you think we also would need to then move every other month for this group, or what's your thought?
Yeah, every other month is fine.
That sound good?
It's like Morgan said, unless something dramatic
Okay.
happens and changes that we need to know about.
Okay, what about if Lisa, how does that sound?
Sounds good.
We'd move these every other month. We're gonna move the other ones to later so everyone could participate, but they would be less personal, obviously.
Which is
Okay,
good since December, we've got the holidays and February, we've got a week off. So we can just do January and then March and kind of skip around.
okay, okay, very good. We actually have December, so we'll take December off the books. Don't we have a December scheduled? Melina, can you help with that? So we'll take December off the books and then, does that sound okay? And then
Yeah,
we'll,
in January, there'll be enough changes in
Okay.
in January.
all
It'll
right,
be a
so
good
we'll go
time.
with January and then we'll also move the other meeting because these all happen in the same week, as you know. So it's tomorrow at 1 o'clock. I'm so excited.
You got the preview.
Yeah, you're ahead of the game.
Lisa,
Okay,
I have one last totally selfish question for you.
Uh-huh.
I have a 4 and a 2-year-old at home. When are we getting the 0 to 4s?
I think we're gonna see in like January, February. They've done the studies, so I think we're on track for January and February.
Thank you.
So I want to add to that selfish thing. Do you see this little picture? That's my granddaughter that was born Thursday. And so I sent Lisa and Matt a note. So when is she getting her vaccination? So we're on actually the same wavelength.
Congratulations, Mary Jane.
I know. Thank you. Thank you. All right, everybody, take care. See you soon. All right. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Goodbye.